Amber Benton. I'm the program director here at the StecoahValleyCenter. And I'm with Aubrey Eisenman of the Clydes, who's going to be performing here on Saturday night at the StecoahValleyCenter as a part of our Appalachian Evening Series. So Aubrey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your band?
Sure. So I'm actually outside right now in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where we're based out of. And we've been here for almost 10 years between my husband and I. And we're in the band together. We both front it. I'm originally from Vermont and New England, kind of all over New England, but I moved down south in my 20s and got more into music since I moved down here and more into the bluegrass vein. And yeah, I was just telling Amber, I have 2 children with Justin, and they both seem to like playing music too so far. We have another bandmate of ours, John Duncan, who's actually a Western North Carolina native, which is kind of rare, as you know. He's from Asheville actually originally, but he lives in Franklin. He's our fiddle player, and he's just a great fiddle player. And he's a good old time player, and he's got a lot of other projects too, but he's been playing with us for quite a few years, John Duncan. And then we rotate. Sometimes Justin and I just play as a duo too. I'm sure you saw that, but we do rotate out our 4th player. Like sometimes we'll have a drummer and sometimes we'll have a mandolin player. We've played a lot with the drummer James Kylan, who's coming with us to Stecoah Valley Arts Center. So that's our lineup, and we're all local here.
So you mentioned that you're from Vermont, and when you moved here, you got more into music. So what does that musical biography look like for you? Like, when did you start playing, and what's your musical story?
So I actually started playing in middle school. I picked up the cello and I did Suzuki. And so cello was my primary instrument, and I actually stuck with it through my early 20s. And then I was dating a fellow who was into bluegrass, and I was at a party and there was a bass in the corner, and he said, "Hey, grab that thing, you play the cello." And I was like, "It's just not even the same scale." But I picked it up, and it was like instant love. I loved it way more than I liked the boyfriend at the time. And it was like just I knew that was going to be my instrument. And so this was probably, I don't know, I was like 23, 24. And so I just made it my goal to get really proficient at the bass as quickly as I could. When I was in Vermont, I had some gigs and I played with a couple groups up there. And it was just, Vermont's like it's beautiful and I miss it, but it's sparse, and, the work is seasonal. And my mother was living down south. So I was like, I'm just going to come down there and give it a try. And then I stumbled up to Asheville, and that's where everything was. It was like all the bluegrass musicians were there and really good bands. And so while I was doing some like folk and bluegrassy bands in my 20s, I didn't really find Justin until I was 30. I was just in a band that kind of dissolved, and I put out an ad in, I think it was Craigslist, that I was looking for a lead guitar player, and he responded. And I had actually crossed paths with him before, like, just touring around. I heard him play once before in Asheville, and I always thought he was like a great player, and he's one of the best guitar players in Asheville. And so he joined the band, and we started this project together, and we started totally platonic, and then we got together, and then we made the Clydes, and that was about 7 years ago. And it's like, not strictly bluegrass, it's folk and Americana, and a good blend of everything that we've got influencing us from both ends. And so that's kind of my musical story. And my dad was a big influence. He was a musician. He had a recording studio when I was a kid in our basement, and he had a band in the 70s and 80s, and they did quite well. And he still actually is in a band. So I grew up with music and folk music.
So far, I haven't interviewed anyone who doesn't have that kind of a family history of music in their childhood, who came to music completely as an adult. So I haven't interviewed that many people yet, but it's a very similar story.
Well, if my husband were here, you'd have your first then, because he actually did not grow up with music. Neither of his parents play, and he just really pursued guitar really hard, and he went to school for it, and it was somewhere in his blood, I guess, but not immediately in his childhood story. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. It definitely seems like it runs through your veins a little bit.
Yeah. So for some of our audience members who are new and outside the bluegrass world, like, can you describe to me what Americana is? How would you describe Americana?
Oh boy. It's so broad. Like I feel like so many things could fit in the Americana vein now, but I think of it as like a little bit edgier folk music maybe. But I think that the influences, I think a lot of Americana bands like all have some kind of a bluegrass history or connection. They may be a little bit more folk and rock influence in there. Really why I think that word was developed was so that people can fall into any category and get, you know, hired at festivals still. So I don't know. It's like talked about this topic a lot with people, but it's really hard to define. I think
Yeah,
it can have a lot of different sounds, but like when you hear it, I think that if you didn't know the word Americana, you would say, oh, that's folky.
right. That's
Do you
interesting.
agree with that?
I mean, I'm learning, so this was part of me just like learning as well. I'm an artist, and so the music world, this music part of my job is very new to me. Of course, I listen to music, but I'm not a musician, and I've never thought about some of those different genres and categories in the same way that I am now when I'm looking at a band and how they describe their music, and then like listening to it and trying to distinguish different sounds and aesthetics and genres.
I think another piece of that, you know, when you think about bluegrass, you have a pretty standard lineup of instruments. You have your upright bass, fiddle, banjo, guitar, mandolin. And if you want to still kind of be bluegrassy, but you want to implement other instruments, I think then you have to start to fall into that category, because there's these festivals that don't want drums and don't want piano or, you know, out of the box instruments. So I think that that's another reason for the label.
That's interesting. When you were talking about when you're describing it being a little more edgier, maybe with some rock influences and things like that, who has influenced you as a musician?
So I feel like I have a really good mix of like traditional artists and growing up, like when I was getting into music, I really liked the Carter family and Hazel Dickens and all those old school artists, and then a little later Gillian Welch, and then a little later than that, or earlier than that, sorry, I really like Stevie Nicks, and so those are my more rockier influences. I like Janis Joplin and Carole King, and I think a good blend of like folk rock and then the super traditional artists. And I haven't really like gone back and revised that as recently. Like that's just as I wrote songs over the years, that those are my influencers that I feel like I've kept the same pretty much.
Yeah, those are the voices that you have in your.
Yeah.
When you were playing cello, were you performing on the cello?
I did both. I played in orchestra in school, in high school, and then I actually remember when I went to New Zealand to tour with a group, and I rented a cello there and played with that group because the upright bass was too big to rent, and I don't think I could find one. So I've mixed it in the music pretty recently, actually, up until pretty recently. So I did perform with it some, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering like when performance kind of entered the picture in your musical story. Was that something that you always saw yourself doing? Or is that just something that kind of developed, as you came south and got more involved in the musical world there in Asheville?
Yeah, I think just sitting around and playing and jamming and having it be just something that I kind of like woodshedded at was more of my interest for a long time. And then when I moved down south, and also I was just trying to make a living at it, or make a living at all, and that seemed like a good segue to shift from just playing to performing. So I think that happened like somewhere in my mid 20s when I started playing on a stage and playing with bands, and I liked it. And actually, when I was in school, and even in as early as elementary or middle school, I did musicals. So I knew that I liked being on a stage. I wasn't like, oh, what's this, what's this going to be like? I'm going to be terrified and get stage fright. So I knew that I liked it, and I liked being in front of an audience, but it was just not in the musical sense yet, or not in playing a musical instrument sense.
What about like female bass players? I know I did a little research before our interview when I started to learn more about you and your story and your band. And I thought, wow, I never thought about female bass players. Kind of quite a few.
Yeah, there are for sure.
Yeah. What are some of those names that maybe you look to or respect as a female bass player?
Yeah, I know you. I saw in your interview questions. I think you mentioned Missy Raines, and
Yeah.
she's great. Actually, we actually played a show with her in Asheville a couple years ago. So it
Nice.
was neat. I don't know if it was intentional that they had two female bassists as their front women, but so she's a great player. I always really liked Esperanza Spalding. She's not a bluegrass bassist, but man, is she just brilliant. She's a jazz bassist, but she sings, and she was really inspiring to me because she can do so many kind of like rhythmic things with her hands and can do something completely separate with her vocals, which is really hard to do on the bass. Like you usually try to keep it pretty simple so you could sing creatively, but she can play and sing creatively at the same time, which is like, I don't know. I don't even think that's in my lifetime, but she's pretty amazing and she's my number one. And not a female, but Edgar Meyer, of course, is amazing, brilliant bassist. They're just, it's such a stylistic thing, and to be able to blend different styles is a cool way to learn. So I would say those are my top two, Edgar Meyer and Esperanza. They're different, but they're also just both brilliant.
Tell us a little bit about your Women in Music series that you do in Asheville.
Yeah, so unfortunately, because of COVID, it's been kind of sleeper series now. It started, gosh, how long has COVID been going on? Is this the third year?
This is the third year.
Okay, so well, here we go back to 3 years ago. Well, so then it started 6 years ago. I put together this show, and it kind of started smaller scale. It was, I just wanted to get together local female artists to recognize iconic female artists. And so and then we hired a backing band, and we started with just like a one night performance, and then the thing sold out. So the next year we decided to do 2 nights, and the thing sold out again. And so it was, I think we did 3 years in a row of it. Yeah, we did. And it's just like, it was largely successful, and I'd love to get back to it, and people loved it. And I think all 3 years we hosted at Isis Music Hall, which is a dinner theater here in town. So we would each pick an artist. Like I say, we picked like, Carly Simon, Janis Joplin, and Carole King, and we had 3 covering females. We would each do a batch of their songs, and then we would give like a lot of history on the artists, and we did the songs true to form, like straight off the album, and use the same instrumentation. So it was fun. It was a lot of work learning the songs like the artists did them. And I think last time we did it, I did Stevie Nicks. I can't remember what the other gals did. I want to say like Bonnie Raitt and maybe Emmylou Harris.
Okay.
So I'd love to get back to it. When the problem is it takes 30 practices or whatever, and so to get all these musicians together and then do all these practices and have the show called off because of COVID, just heart-wrenching. I don't even want to go near it until we are like totally clear, if that's ever going to be a thing. But I'd love to get back to it someday.
Yeah.
Soon. Because people really liked it here, and it got really good press. And
tell me what COVID was like for you. I have talked to different musicians, and sometimes it was a time of quietness or stillness, and they use that creatively to write and to produce. What has it been like for you?
COVID for me was a shifting of gears. Like, to be honest with you, it kind of knocked me out of the music mindset. And in my head, I was like, well, first of all, we had 2 kids that were young. We also have 2 other, Justin's a full-time luthier, and I train horses also as another job. So we had to get to the things that made money, and because nobody was being hired for shows, we kind of like put music on the back burner and got back to those other jobs that we had. And then those just took off. For a while we did like those, remember when people were doing like live streams?
Mm-hmm.
We did, Justin and I would just go down to the basement when the kids went to sleep and did live streams. But it's hard, like not being in front of people, not getting a live feedback. And so that slowly dissolved, and maybe we did like 10 of them or something. And it's just hard to stay motivated. So no, I didn't write. I didn't play. I actually didn't pick up my bass for almost a year.
Wow.
It was just a kind of and maybe it's okay to have those little resets where you're like, because the year before, just before COVID hit, I think we played like 240 shows. And that was like, this huge shift. And I'm a real all or nothing gal, so I don't want to sit around and write songs that I'm never going to get to play. And so I got into something else that I loved for a while.
Yeah. Horses.
Yeah. That's my other love. My dad was a musician and my mother was a horsewoman. So I have both things in there,
Nice.
which I think is good because COVID just showed how vulnerable we are as musicians. Musician friends that did okay were the ones that wear multiple hats and were able to put on another hat and say, okay, it's time to do this thing, and a little bit of survival.
Yeah, it's good that you have that. Do you want to talk about Justin's guitars?
Yeah.
So,
Actually, I can maybe I'm outside and I'm sitting right, this is can you see his workshop?
yeah, we can.
So he built that shop himself the fall before COVID hit, and he thank God he did because he lives in there, and he's about tripled his business over the last couple years. He builds custom guitars, and he is also slammed with repairs all the time. He's kind of the go-to guy in town. Do you know Town Mountain? That's a band in town here.
I
He
know.
just built a custom guitar for Robert Greer, who's they're pretty heavily touring, really cool band. So yeah, he's got some great ideas. He's really artistic and really detailed, and it's neat because he gets to play a lot out there, and he has great musicians come through that he can sit and pick a song with and send them off with a fixed guitar. And I think when we play the Stecoah Valley Arts Center, he'll probably have his own build that he has too.
Yeah,
So
I saw the pictures. They're beautiful.
he's up. Yeah, he's really talented, and he's been building for years. Even as a kid, he was whittling away in his dad's workshop, and so that is totally his thing. He loves working with woods.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your songwriting, because that was one of the things that interested me about your story, is the different kinds of songs that you've written. Like some of them are kind of biographical, but some of them are like stories that have been passed down to you, and some of them are like completely fiction. Can you talk a little bit about your songwriting?
Yeah, you just said it all. I feel like I've covered the gambit with all those different styles. Feel like I don't have 90% of the things that I've written are not personal, not about me.
Okay.
Because I like stories, and I'm pretty imaginative, and I like as a kid I loved making up stories about people that weren't true, and sort of gotten away from. You can't really do that as an adult, but you can do it in songs. I've first of all just written stories like from the maybe things that I've heard about other people tell me about their personal situations, or things that I just imagine. And I've also just like straight up looked up like best ghost stories in the country, and gone off of things that I've read.
Pick a song and tell us a little bit about the story of that song or the writing of that song.
So I have this one, it's semi-personal, but then I also kind of changed some of the details that make it not super personal. So it's kind of funny because it's a song called December, and it was a song that I wrote a while ago, but I think we have a video of it online, and it was about like my parents divorcing, and but then it like shoots back to their conversation together. Like the chorus is like, all we ever wanted was a pretty white December, and it goes on. But the first line is like, I was born in a New York snowstorm. My daddy, he was trying to get back home, but he didn't make it, and mama couldn't take it. But that's not true, because he did make it. And so my dad heard this story, and he's like, I know this song is about me and your mother, but I was there, right? And I'm like, Dad, it's fine. Like I changed a little detail to rhyme. But like, yeah, I think a good mix, that's the most probably personal song I have as far as like a story of my own, but I still always change the details a little bit.
Yeah. And you have a new album out. Well, it's not new, but I still think it's recent. We call it recent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's recent because we recorded it, and then like COVID came pretty soon, and we didn't get to campaign it a whole lot. But we recorded that in Virginia with Traviana Records, which is Mountain Fever's sister record company. And yeah, like at this show we'll play a lot of those tunes because they're still kind of fresh in our minds.
Yeah, and that album's called Bowerbird.
Bowerbird. Do you know about bowerbirds?
I think they're the ones that like collect all the little pretty things to
Yeah.
attract their mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the males actually do it. The males build these beautiful like ornate nests to attract the females. The crossover or connection was like trying to make a standout album basically and make something unique and ornate to draw people in. But their nests are beautiful. Like I've seen pictures and they make things out of garbage look like masterpieces.
So what would you say to our audience here at Stecoah? What you guys are going to bring to the stage and what you're looking forward to, or tell us a little bit about maybe what people might see and hear in your music when they come.
Well, first of all, we're really excited to play because this is the first time we've played as a full band since before COVID. So yeah, so this is like a little reunion for us, and we all love each other and get along really well. So I'm sure you'll see some really good stage dynamics, and because we're all good friends. The trio, like John, our fiddle player, myself, upright bass, and Justin on guitar, have played quite a bit over the years. As a 4-piece, we haven't played in 3 years, so we're really excited about that. We did practice, you guys. We're not going to sound like, we don't know what we're doing, but it's been a while, so it's almost like a little bit of a reunion style show for us. So you might feel that energy there, which is cool. And we have a couple so we'll play a lot of original stuff, but we also have a couple really cool covers that actually we took from the Women in Music performances. So I'm not going to tell you what they are, but they're really awesome songs.
We look forward to it. Yeah, we've been having that kind of reunion feeling ourselves here because we've been doing this concert series for 23 years. This is our 23rd year.
Wow.
And
Awesome.
yeah, in 2020 was the first year that we've had no concerts. So we had the auditorium was empty and silent. And then last year we had kind of a half hybrid season. So they did some broadcasts, some in person and live broadcast. And then like the Kruger Brothers sent in a live broadcast. But we're all excited to be back in person. And you can just feel it in the audience that people are happy to be back together.
Yeah, I actually think we have a couple songs that are new also that we don't have recorded anywhere. That's fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. Well, we look forward to having you here.
We're super good. Thanks for having us, and we hope to see everybody out. And I know we have some people traveling all the way from Asheville to Robbinsville, which is a haul, so we're excited to see those folks too.
That's great. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I know that we've been trying to connect all week, and you're on the road, and your schedule with kids and work and everything is pretty busy. So thank you for taking this time.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon. See you in a couple days.
Yes.